It is not just the golden ray. It is a question that has never been answered. How could a floating fortress worth over $200 million, advertised as a masterpiece of modern stability, collapse in perfectly calm waters just 23 minutes after leaving the dock? Why did a system designed to defy Atlantic hurricanes and rogue waves surrender to a simple keystroke error in a ballast computer? And more importantly, why did 4,200 brand new vehicles become the first victims of the very confidence they trusted? But that is only the surface. Behind the moment, the massive steel Leviathan lay paralyzed on its side. Exposing its underbelly to the Georgia sun like a beached whale lies another story less told, but equally dangerous, about invisible physics. The arrogance of efficiency and a chain of small errors merging into history. Why did it all happen on a quiet Sunday morning in September 2019? And what actually killed the Golden Ray? Was it the weight of the steel, the sharpness of the turn, or the human element? Stay tuned. Because the truth about the Golden Ray is unlike any story you know. September 8, 2019, the port of Brunswick, Georgia. The morning sun broke over the marshes, casting a warm amber glow on the St. Simons Sound. It was a perfect day for logistics. The air smelled of salt diesel and the specific chemically sweet scent of 4,200 brand new automobiles. At the center of this industrial cathedral stood the MV Golden Ray. She was not merely a ship, she was a floating skyscraper. A 656-foot steel box designed for a singular capitalist purpose: to move the American dream from the factory floor to the suburban driveway. She was a ro-ro, a roll-on, roll-off carrier, a vessel that functioned less like a boat and more like a massive multi-story parking garage wrapped in a hull. The scene inside the cargo hold was a symphony of precision. Stevedores drove the pristine Kias and Hyundais up the internal ramps with practice speed. Tires squealed on the epoxy floors. Doors slammed shut. Chains rattled as they were hooked to the chassis, cinching the vehicles tight to the deck. Every inch of space was monetized. To the untrained eye, it was a masterclass in efficiency. The logistical team had achieved a density that would make a sardine envious, stacking heavy SUVs on the upper decks to maximize the load. It was a scene of absolute industrial control. The steel walls hummed with the vibration of the generators, and the fluorescent lights gleamed off the polished hoods of the cars. The heavy steel chains locked the vehicles into place with a reassuring clank. A sound of absolute security that masked the silent, invisible truth: the ship's center of gravity was quietly rising, inch by deadly inch, above the threshold of survival. On the bridge, the atmosphere was professional and calm. The Golden Ray was a modern vessel equipped with sophisticated ballast control systems designed to keep this top-heavy giant upright. The chief officer managed the loading computer, a digital brain responsible for calculating the vessel's stability. He input the cargo weights. He checked the draft. But the data was a lie. In the pursuit of operational speed and draft requirements, a critical decision had been made regarding the ballast water. The heavy seawater pumped into the bottom of the ship to act as a counterweight. To accommodate the load and navigate the channel depths, the ship had discharged nearly 1,500 metric tons of this vital stabilizing water. The computer fed with the wrong parameters, or perhaps misinterpreted in the rush of departure, flashed green. It promised them that the ship had a GM, a metacentric height that was positive and safe. The officers trusted the screen. They trusted the math. They believed that the thousands of tons of steel and rubber stacked high above the waterline were perfectly balanced by the hull below. At roughly 1:00 p.m., the pilot, Captain Jonathan Tennant, boarded the vessel. He was a veteran of these waters, a man who knew every current and sandbar in the St. Simons Sound. The handshake with the ship's master was firm. The coffee was hot. The view from the bridge, towering 10 stories above the water, offered a commanding vista of the Georgia coastline. The massive engines roared to life, churning the brown water of the harbor into white foam. The Golden Ray cast off her lines. She began to move, sliding gracefully away from the dock. She looked majestic, a titan of global trade heading for the open ocean, destined for Baltimore, then the Middle East. As she picked up speed, the breeze cooled the bridge wings. The crew settled into the routine of the voyage. The Sunday afternoon felt lazy and safe. There was no storm on the horizon. The water was as flat as a mirror. The radar swept in a rhythmic, hypnotic circle, painting a clear path ahead, blind to the fact that the vessel was already a zombie dead in the water, waiting for the first turn to make it official. The pilot ordered a slight increase in speed. The heavy vessel responded obediently. They approached the turn seaward, a routine maneuver performed thousands of times by ships of this class. The Golden Ray looked invincible, a monument to human engineering gleaming in the sun, carrying $200 million of inventory toward the horizon. 1:39 p.m. The channel narrows. Pilot Tennant gives the order, starboard 20. The helmsman spins the wheel. The rudder bites into the current. The Golden Ray begins to swing her bow toward the ocean. It is a standard maneuver. The ship lists gently to port, leaning into the turn like a cyclist on a curve. This is physics. This is expected. But then the physics break. The ship leans. And she does not stop. Usually a vessel fights back. The righting arm, the inherent buoyancy of the hull, should push against the water, forcing the ship back to vertical. But the Golden Ray has no fight left. Her center of gravity is too high. She is a pendulum stuck at the top of its swing. As the pilot reaches for the radio, the horizon outside the bridge window rotates violently, syncing perfectly with the sickening slide of the captain's chair across the linoleum floor. Panic erupts on the bridge. Tennant shouts orders. Hard to port, counter rudder. He's trying to steer a falling building. The rudder is useless. The propeller is churning air. The laws of buoyancy have been repealed. Deep inside the belly of the beast, the world ends in a cacophony of steel. On the cargo decks, the nightmare begins. 4,200 cars are suspended in the dark. As the angle passes 40 degrees, the laws of friction fail. The heavy lashing chains designed to hold vehicles in rough seas are now holding the entire dead weight of SUVs hanging sideways. Snap. The first chain breaks with the sound of a gunshot, then another, then 1,000. It is a domino effect of destruction. Cars detach from the floor and plummet through the air, smashing into the walls, crushing into each other. Glass shatters. Metal crumples. The sound is deafening. A continuous grinding scream of industrial death as millions of dollars of inventory are pulverized in seconds. The smell of gasoline vapors floods the air. Sparks fly in the darkness. But the true horror is happening below the waterline. In the engine room, 4 engineers are monitoring the gauges. Suddenly, the floor drops out from under them. They do not fall down, they fall sideways. The massive diesel engine the size of a house becomes a wall. The wall becomes the floor. Tools, clipboards, and loose metal turn into shrapnel. The lights flicker and die. Total darkness. The ocean rushes in, not as a leak, but as a deluge. The cooling pipes burst. Scalding steam hisses into the black void. The temperature begins to rise. The water is rising with it. The exit. The door they walked through minutes ago is now 40 feet above their heads, unreachable. Back on the surface, the Golden Ray completes her death roll. She slams into the sandy bottom of the St. Simons Sound with a shudder that shakes the earth. She lies on her port side, an 80-degree angle of repose. The roar of the crashing cars stops. The engines cough and die. Silence returns to the bay. But it is not a peaceful silence. It is a heavy, pressurized silence. Inside the overturned hull, the 4 men are alive. They are bruised, burned, and terrified. They are standing on electrical panels that are now the floor, watching the black water inch up their legs. They have no radio. They have no light. One of them picks up a wrench. He finds a section of the steel hull that isn't underwater, and he strikes it. He strikes it again. They are buried under thousands of tons of steel, hidden beneath the waterline, beating a desperate rhythm against the skin of the monster that just tried to kill them. They are waiting for a world that thinks they are already dead. For 36 hours, the silence of the St. Simons Sound was broken only by the rhythmic metallic tapping from the deep. It was a primitive Morse code of survival. Inside the overturned hull, the 4 trapped engineers were running out of air. The heat was tropical, the darkness absolute. Above them, on the exposed side of the hull, the United States Coast Guard walked on what used to be the vertical wall of the ship. They pressed their ears against the steel skin, listening for the heartbeat of the machine's prisoners. They did not use door handles to enter. They used diamond-tipped drills. When the first bore broke through the hull, a hiss of pressurized, fetid air escaped the breath of a dying ship. One by one, the men were pulled from the darkness, blinking into the blinding Georgia daylight, covered in oil and soot, resurrected from a steel tomb that should have claimed them. But while the souls were saved, the body remained. The Golden Ray was now a 60-story obstruction, blocking one of America's busiest auto ports. She was too heavy to flip too broken to float, and filled with 4,000 cars that had transformed into hazardous waste. The engineers looked at the math and realized there was no gentle way to remove her. They had to dissect the beast. Enter the VB-1000. It arrived like a visitor from a science fiction future, a twin gantry catamaran crane, a yellow archway of steel, so colossal it could straddle the wreck entirely. It was the largest lift vessel ever built in the United States. Its job was not to lift the ship, but to hold the knife. The plan was audacious in its violence. They would not use torches or lasers. They would use a chain. A massive steel chain with links the size of a man's torso was threaded under the submerged hull. The engines of the VB-1000 roared, pulling the chain upward in a sawing motion. It was brute force engineering. The chain bit into the keel, grinding through the reinforced steel plating, then through the decks, then through the cars themselves. The sound was a low-frequency groan that vibrated through the water and into the bones of the onlookers on shore. It was the sound of a structure being unmade, As the chain tore through the cargo holds, the cross-section of the ship was revealed to the world. It looked like a macabre dollhouse. The layers of the vessel were exposed, revealing the crushed remains of the inventory. A red SUV flattened to the thickness of a book, tumbled out of the open wound, and splashed into the water, followed by a shower of spare tires and shattered glass, the confetti of a $200 million funeral. Then came the fire. In May 2021, the friction of the cutting chain ignited the lingering fuel vapors inside the wreck. The Golden Ray became a furnace. Flames shot hundreds of feet into the air, turning the yellow gantries of the VB-1000 black with soot. The heat was so intense, it melted the paint off the salvage barges. It was a scene of apocalyptic beauty fire, dancing on top of the ocean, consuming the remains of mass production. For 2 years, the operation continued. Slice by slice, the giant crane lifted the 8 massive sections onto barges. Each section weighed up to 4,000 tons, dripping with mud oil and the mangled carcasses of automobiles. They were hauled away to scrap yards in Louisiana, a procession of industrial failures paraded down the coast. The environmental barrier, a giant net surrounding the site, caught thousands of floating bumpers and plastic dashboards. But the smaller things escaped. For months, locals would find strange artifacts washing up on the beaches of St. Simons. A pristine owner's manual, a single unworn leather shoe, a plastic turn signal lever resting in the sand, still waiting for a driver to signal a turn that would never happen. By late 2021, the final cut was made. The last piece of the hull was lifted from the water, leaving a gaping hole in the horizon where the mountain of steel had lain for 2 years. The Golden Ray was gone. The water of the St. Simons Sound is flat again. The giant yellow arches of the VB-1000 are gone. The barges, the cranes, and the armies of salvage workers have packed up and moved on to the next disaster. If you stand on the pier at Brunswick today, looking out toward the channel, there is nothing to suggest that a 20,000-ton Leviathan once lay there, bleeding oil and cars into the tide. The ocean is efficient. It heals its wounds quickly. It washes away the evidence. But while the physical scar has vanished, the forensic scar remains etched in the archives of the National Transportation Safety Board. For 2 years, while the cutters sawed through the steel, investigators sawed through the data. They hunted for the ghost in the machine. They needed to know why a modern ship, equipped with the most advanced navigation technology in human history, simply fell over. The answer, when it finally came, was terrifying in its banality. It was not a rogue wave. It was not a mechanical failure of the rudder. It was not a hidden reef. It was a math error. The investigation revealed that the Golden Ray was top-heavy, not by a little, but by a catastrophic margin. The chief officer, in his rush to prepare the final stability calculations, had inputted the wrong data into the ship's load computer. He had overestimated the amount of ballast water in the tanks. He believed the ship had a safety margin of nearly 6 feet of metacentric height. In reality, the margin was 0. The ship was balancing on a knife's edge before it even left the dock. The 4 200 cars stacked high on the upper decks acted like a massive lever. The moment the pilot ordered that routine turn, the centrifugal force didn't just push the ship, it pushed the math over the cliff. The computer screen had shown a green light, a digital promise of safety, while the physics of the real world were screaming in red. This is the haunting legacy of the Golden Ray. It forces us to confront the fragility of our modern, just-in-time world. We build ships larger than skyscrapers. We fill them with inventory worth the GDP of a small nation. We automate the systems and trust the algorithms. But in the end, the entire system can be brought to its knees by a fatigued officer hitting the wrong key on a keyboard. The salvage operation cost upwards of $800 million. The cargo loss was another 200 million, a billion-dollar disaster caused by the absence of cheap, heavy water in the bottom of a hull. There is a profound irony in the destruction of the Golden Ray. We often view these massive machines as conquerors of nature. We look at their steel skins and their roaring engines and assume they are immune to the primal laws of the sea. But the ocean does not care about our engineering. It does not care about our insurance policies or our delivery schedules. The ocean is a strict auditor. It tests every weld, every rivet, and every calculation. And if the numbers do not balance, it collects its due. The Golden Ray was not destroyed by the sea. It was destroyed by arrogance. The arrogance of believing that we can cheat the center of gravity. The arrogance of prioritizing capacity over stability. The arrogance of trusting the screen over the sensation. Now the channel is open again. New ro-ro carriers steam past the spot where the wreck lay, carrying thousands more cars to the dealerships of America. Their decks are stacked high. Their engines hum with the same frequency. Their officers stare at similar screens, trusting similar green lights. But for the locals of St. Simon's Island, the memory lingers. They remember the sight of the beast on its side. They remember the smoke. And they remember the silence of those first 36 hours when 4 men tapped on the steel walls of a dark, inverted world, reminding us that inside every piece of global commerce, there are human hearts beating in the dark. The ship is gone. The cars have been melted down and recycled into new steel, perhaps, to build new cars or new ships. The cycle of production continues without a pause. The supply chain has healed, but the lesson remains on the seabed, buried under the shifting sands of the Georgia coast. It is a quiet warning to the next captain, the next engineer, and the next industry titan who believes they have mastered the waves. You can build a fortress of steel. You can fill it with gold. But if you forget the water will not forget you. History is not just dates and numbers. It is the collective memory of our species. Thank you for taking the time to remember these events with us. If you have a story or an event you believe deserves to be told, leave it in the comments. We are listening.